Perfect day to talk about, once again, how Black Americans deserve reparations because our ancestors were forced to do free labor and the debt is owed.
Okay, that's amazing. So if you really want reparations, you want to talk about it, should we talk about the 3,500 plus black slave owners that were in the U.S. currently at the time when the Civil War was being fought? Or how about the fact it was rival African tribes that enslaved the African people, which sold them into the Jamaican slave trade, which ended up them being in America? But since you are so dead set on reparations, why don't you start, like I said, with the 3,500 black slave owners and see how that works out for you?
Slavery. San Francisco, they're looking to pay reparations for black people. Should Americans pay for reparations?
Why is it just for black people?
I think it's to right the wrongs of previous injustices such as slavery.
Is it a trial or a study?
No, I think it's just a bill that's being proposed.
Oh, okay. There's other things in the world and in San Francisco that need to be addressed.
Do you think reparations would de-incentivize personal responsibility and hard work, or would it have positive effects?
I don't think it would have positive effects.
Greetings everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel once again, and in today's episode I'm going to talk about the reparation issue in the United States. As you all understand, the Black American community has always been in the front line, that is calling for the reparations from the United States as the compensation for all the free labor and the inhumane treatment that black slaves and their descendants managed to endure in the United States. And this topic is still quite sensitive and has caused massive online debate, as we're getting to see that the federal government in the United States is actively going against the reparation idea, with the recent move being experienced during the UN declaration of the transatlantic slave trade period being one of the most inhumane and devastating situations that any human could experience. And in this motion, again, we're getting to understand that the United Nations also pushed for reparation, in which we get to understand that the United States actively voted against it. So in today's episode, we are going to look at this, and I will kindly request that you watch the rest of this episode while I come with my commentaries at the end of it.
How do I feel about reparations for Black Americans? I feel that if the government isn't going to settle its debt, there is no hope for this country. Until we reconcile the balance sheet for all the stolen lives, stolen labor, and the fact that this country got to skip all of the growth years to become an economic superpower on the backs of enslaved Black Americans, until we honor the treaties in the sacred land of the indigenous and hold true to the word that we gave, a treaty which is supposed to supersede even the Constitution, there's no hope for unity. America loves to pride itself on this idea that it's a country that keeps its word. Its handshake is as good as its signature on a contract, but our signature on a contract is no good. And until we deal with those things, we will just be stuck microscopically moving the needle towards equity, but we can never get there until those things are done.
Black Americans have absolutely no reason to defend America, to fight for America, to honor America until we give reparations. Now, before y'all lose your shit and start saying, I didn't have any slaves, slavery was over 100 years ago, chill the fuck out, all right? Because that's not what we're talking about. This did not end 100 years ago. Slavery was not the end of all discrimination. It was not the end of all wealth being stripped and taken from Black Americans. Reconstruction era, Jim Crow era, Civil Rights era, the crack epidemic, there's not a point in time where America was not putting down Black Americans, taking their wealth from them, and preventing them from building capital. I went through and listed a whole bunch of Black towns that were destroyed by angry white mobs. Many of these towns were self-sufficient, and many of them had very wealthy Black residents like Jack Hawley, who had 700 acres, a granary, a general store that was taken from him and never given back. He never got any reparations for it. That is wealth and capital that could have been passed on generationally that was stopped by white America. And it wasn't just the angry racist mobs that were causing this wealth inequality. Even though that alone should qualify for reparations, there was also the redlining. There was also the U.S. highways that destroyed neighborhoods. There was gentrification that's still happening today. In a capitalist society, Those who have capital will get more capital. Those who don't have capital, even what they have will be taken from them. So while white Americans got to pass on their capital, their wealth, generation after generation, black Americans and brown Americans had to restart over and over. Have y'all not played Monopoly? Do you know what happens when one person owns all the properties? It gets a lot less fun to play for the rest of the people. Shit, when I played Monopoly, we were ready to fight each other. My siblings, we hated each other after that game. If you were winning, you were just rubbing it in everybody else's face, and the losers were always having the worst time and end up flipping the damn board over. That is literally a perfect analogy of what is happening today. Black Americans are flipping the board over. They're tired of the game because the game has never suited them. It's getting boring. So how do we give out reparations? At this point, it would be damn near impossible to do it based on race, okay? There's so much mixing, what percentage, who would get it, it would just make a whole big mess. So that's why most people immediately stop thinking about reparations. Oh, we can't even do it. That'd be too complicated. But there is a way to do it. Y'all just don't want to give reparations. You could set up reparations that are not just cash. You're not just giving out stimulus checks. You could set it up to where people in these zip codes that were redlined can get loans, interest-free loans for houses, for businesses. Reparations does not have to be cash. It could be education. It could be welfare. It could be housing. To prevent people from gentrifying these areas because of these loans, you do it based on income. This would also benefit not only Black Americans, but Mexican Americans, Native Americans, Hawaiians, even Puerto Ricans. The entire island of Puerto Rico would qualify for this. Germany gave out reparations, okay? And they apologized. They sincerely apologized for what they did. And now look at their nation. It's one of the best places to live in the world. Hands down. Your social benefits are there. You have unlimited sick days. You have paid time off. You have affordable food, affordable housing. These are all things that were made possible because they paid reparations. I would argue if they never paid reparations, they would not have as great of a society as they do, because the people changed. The hearts of the people changed. And that's what has never happened in America. And even if this whole thing flops and nobody's life gets better because of reparations, right? At least we have shown people that we are changed by heart and that we care and that we want these communities to do better. And that would actually give these people in these communities a reason to care about America, a reason to fight for freedom. Right now, they have no reason. We've never given them a reason because we've never truly apologized. We've never rectified what happened. And until that day happens, we are going to be divided in this country.
No black person alive has been enslaved, and no white person alive has owned a slave. Why would we talk about reparations? You're not owed anything. You just want a free handout. Do they just want a free handout? Or are we overlooking all of the history that brought us to where we are? People love to say that all races have been enslaved, that slavery existed everywhere, and that slavery still exists in Africa. We're not talking about everywhere. We live here. We're talking about the United States of America. And what happened here was not just slavery, it was a system. When what is now known as the United States started building off the slave trade, they didn't just accidentally create inequality. They wrote it into law. There were free black people in early America. There were black people who built wealth, who owned land, who worked, who went to court, and who stood in some of the same legal and financial places as white people. But the people in power did not like that. They did not want black people free. They did not like the idea that poor black people and poor white people were realizing they had more in common than they did with wealthy landowners. So they created a racial system that kept black people at the bottom and gave poor white people just enough status to protect the system. This is where racial chattel slavery comes in. Chattel means property. Black people were not just enslaved as workers. They were not indentured servants. They were legally deemed property. They were stripped of their entire personhood, stripped of every human right, and that passed down through their bloodline. Which means if your mother was enslaved, when you were born, you were enslaved just because of her status. So no, you don't get to just dismiss this as everyone went through slavery. Because this was not just slavery. This was a system built to keep black people enslaved, controlled, unpaid, uneducated and unable to build anything for generations. So the entire time, white families were building land, generational wealth, businesses, home ownership, inheritances. They were forcing black families to work for free and legally blocking them from making any advances to pass down to theirs. When slavery ended, they were still not handed freedom or equality. People love to talk about 40 acres and a mule. It was promised, land was set aside for it, but majority of that land was given back to the Confederates and the former slave owners. So black families were denied wealth during slavery and then denied the resources to help build back after slavery. Then came black codes, Jim Crow, segregation, voter suppression, redlining, housing discrimination, job discrimination, banking discrimination, education discrimination, and policing discrimination. That is systemic racism. That's a word that people do not like, but that's what it is. Racism built into laws, schools, banking, housing, jobs, policing, and any opportunity to help them get ahead. And it's not gone. So when people say, why reparations? This is why. Reparations are not about free money. It's about repair. This country did not just hurt feelings. It stole labor. It stole land. It stole wages. It stole education. It stole opportunity. And then told the descendants of those people to catch up on their own. And just so you know, the United Nations has called the trafficking and chattel enslavement of Africans the gravest crime against humanity. So the question is not, why are reparations being talked about? The question is, why does America still have such a problem being honest about repair? This is the beginning of a series of the unwhitewashed version of United States history. Stay tuned.
You want to talk about reparations? We pay reparations. What do you mean you want reparations? Our taxpayer dollars, which are mostly white people paying that, goes to, affordable housing, government programs, EBT, scholarships, DEI, you guys getting jobs. Holy shit. Let's take all that, factor in the theft, factor in the crime, factor it in the murders, and then we'll talk about reparations on this show. How about that? You probably won't like that, will you? Because you're not going to like the numbers. But we are all, frankly, exhausted.
This is a very ignorant and facetious take on the topic of reparations. Government assistance programs who anybody can apply for, including immigrants who just got here yesterday. Almost nobody qualifies for. It's supposed to be reparations for 400 years of chattel slavery. And what does crime rates have to do with reparations? I'm starting to believe that most people actually don't know what reparative justice actually is. It's supposed to repair something that happened in the past. And I just love how people always make it seem like black people are the only ones who commit crimes. Like, we're the only, crimes happen in every single community. This is the reason why I will never take the opinion of outsiders into account when talking about Black American issues. There's just not, it's just too unserious.
Hey family, did you know that the Jews got reparations because of the Holocaust from Germany, but Black Americans still haven't? Let's get into it. Today's workshop is titled Why Jews Got Reparations but Black Americans Didn't. You know, when we talk about reparations, it's not about just competition or comparison, but it's about justice. After the Holocaust, Germany made it a priority, and I really respect this about them. They made it a priority to compensate Jewish survivors and their descendants. Yet here in America, after over 250 years of chattel slavery and another 100 years of racial terror, Black Americans have received nothing, not even an apology. Why not? Well, what makes these two histories different in the eyes of the law, the government, and society? Well, y'all, this video that I put together, it's not about putting one group down. It's really about understanding how nations respond to their historical wrongs and why. Why even today the United States government refuses to address the lasting impact of slavery. So we're going to dive into the facts, the policies, and the missed opportunities where America could have made things right. Because if one country can acknowledge its past like Germany did after and offer reparations, why can't America? Let's go into it. Section 1, how and why the Jews received reparations. Let's start with what happened after the Holocaust, okay? The Holocaust, which lasted from 1933 to 1945, led the systemic extermination of 6 million Jews and the destruction of Jewish communities across Europe. That's sad. That's devastating. In the aftermath, the newly formed Israeli government and Jewish organizations demanded reparations from Germany, and they got them. In 1952, West Germany signed the Luxembourg Agreement. It was with Israel and the Conference on Jewish Material Claims against Germany. And under this agreement, check this out, Germany paid Israel $822 million, which is equivalent to about $10 billion today. They paid that to support Holocaust survivors and help rebuild the Jewish state. They also, the individual Holocaust survivors received direct deposits, y'all, including pensions and social welfare support. And they received compensation. It was given to those whose property had been stolen or destroyed. To date, Germany has paid over 90 billion. You heard that right, billion in reparations. Survivors and their descendants continue to receive payments for the trauma and economic losses suffered during the Holocaust. Mm, mm, mm. Section 2, why Black Americans never got reparations. Now let's contrast this with what happened, or rather what did not happen, y'all. This did not happen for Black Americans after slavery. Enslaved Africans were kidnapped, brutalized, forced to work for free for over 250 years. America built its wealth on the backs of Black labor. But after slavery ended in 1865, what did Black people get? Nothing. Let's talk about this whole 40 acres and a mule and the broken promise. In January 1865, Union General William T. Sherman issued a special field order number 15, okay? It promised freed Black people 40 acres of land and a mule to start new lives as independent landowners. But after Lincoln was assassinated, President Andrew Johnson and his racist behind reversed the order. And instead of giving Black families land, the government returned it to former slave owners, returned it back to the white man. So instead of reparations, Black people got, what do we get? Jim Crow laws, voter suppression, segregation, lynchings, and decades upon decades of economic exclusion. But the U.S. government's refusal to pay. Unlike Germany, which took responsibility for its crimes, the United States government has repeatedly rejected reparations for Black Americans. Even after slavery ended, Black people continue to be robbed of economic opportunities through the sharecropping and tenant farming, which trapped them in cycles of debt. The GI Bill of 1944, which included many Black veterans from, excluded them Black veterans from home loans and education benefits, the GI Bill, and redlining. I talked about this a lot, which blocked Black families from buying homes in, quote, good neighborhoods or not impoverished neighborhoods. So let's fast forward today. And the average Black family has about 10% of the wealth of the average white family. That's not an accident, y'all. It's the direct result of policies that have been denied Black people's reparations, while other groups, including Jews, the Japanese Americans, and Native Americans, have received compensation for historical injustices. So let's talk about the myth that Black people got reparations through welfare. That's a bunch of bullshit. One argument people make, particularly white people, is that Black people don't need reparations because welfare programs and affirmative action somehow made up for slavery. But that's simply not true. Welfare is not reparations. It's available for all poor Americans. And the biggest beneficiary of public assistance has been white women. Don't believe the hype with the picture they want to paint. Welfare is for all poor Americans, not just blacks. Second of all, affirmative action has benefited white women more than black people. Thirdly, black Americans were deliberately left out of programs like the New Deal's Social Security system in the 1930s. The United States has had plenty of chances to do right, y'all. Plenty. From the Reconstruction era to today, but it has refused every time. It's so sad, y'all. It's so sad. So, what would reparations look like for black Americans? Let's get into that. So, if black Americans did get reparations, what would that look like? Well, according to economists by the name of Dr. William Darity, the United States government should pay at least $14 trillion to close the racial wealth gap. That could be done through one, direct payments to descendants of enslaved people, free college education for black students, and zero interest home loans and business grants. Some cities like Evanston, Illinois, have started small scale reparations programs, but real justice would require federal action, just like it did for the Holocaust survivors. So, what's our takeaway, y'all? Germany, they acknowledged its crimes and they made amends. But America, on the other hand, for whatever reason, continues to deny, delay, and deflect. See, reparations aren't just about money, it's about justice, y'all. They're about repairing and repaying what was stolen. Until the United States takes responsibility, the legacy of slavery will continue to shape black lives for generations, y'all. So the next time somebody says or asks a black person, why haven't black people gotten reparations? Send them this video. It's time for the truth to be told, you all. If Germany could recognize the heinous and evil atrocities of the Holocaust and those 6 million Jews who lost their lives, why can't America? What is so void in the soul of many white Americans, especially those white men in power, that they can't even recognize the evil that happened on American soil and rectify it? At least say, I'm sorry. Have you ever been wronged? And you just say, if I could just get an apology, I could just start to heal. And so many of you all, you want to say, just get over it. But if your spouse cheated on you and they say, just get over it, you would never be able to heal. Or if you healed, it takes a lot of time to work through a lot of trauma. But hey, thank you all so much. Continue to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a message. Let me know what you think about this. Does that change your opinions about Germany, about the United States? Well, continue to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And if my videos bless you, my Venmo and my Buy Me a Coffee is right there for you. I want to thank all of those you all who have bought me coffees and continue to support my channel, because I tell you, it takes a lot of work to do this research. Love you. Bye.
Bro, I just heard the natives get paid like every month or every 3 months or something. When the niggas, the African Americans of America, don't get paid? What you mean? Why we ain't getting no money? We'll be good. We would have been good. We wouldn't be robbing or gangbang or nothing. We'll have our money. We'll be good. That's crazy. That's crazy. Why we don't get no money like the natives? Why the African Americans don't get no money like the natives? Why not? And I mean the ones that was born here. Why we don't get nothing? We don't deserve nothing? Ain't nothing happen? Ain't nothing happen to us? We don't deserve nothing? Nothing? Drop a like, drop a comment, drop a follow. Follow. And let me know what y'all know or think. Because what the hell going on? Natives get money, but we don't get money? And I think I'm half and half. I don't even know. Whatever, man. Boom.
The black community needs reparations, whether you like it or not. Reparations to fix, to repair, to heal damaged and broken things. And no, we don't just need reparations for slavery, but that's a good start. We also need reparations for the fact that there are entire black towns hidden under lakes. Yeah, there are black towns that were submerged under bodies of water by white people. We didn't do anything to deserve this, and we did not do anything like this to y'all. And this impacts us to this day because these are places where black people could have thrived and could have built generational wealth that they could have passed down to their children. Also, these people basically have not gotten justice yet. And like half of the time, some of you white folks aren't even willing to even say, hey, I'm sorry this happened. Instead, you'll just deflect and say, well, the Democrats did it. And it's not just that. We need reparations for Jim Crow. Our grandparents went through that. And it's because of shit like Jim Crow that the black community is still poor to this day. Regardless of whether or not the white guilt is kicked in yet or how you feel about this, it doesn't change the fact that whether you acknowledge it or not, every white person in this country benefits from a system of oppression that benefits them at the behest of people such as myself. That in and of itself is grounds for reparation. And then it's really funny to me how there's some white people that will say that black people benefited from being slaves or being enslaved here in America. Please explain to me how we benefited from being here in America without mentioning Africa. The Africa, by the way, that is in the position that it's in right now, largely because of colonialism and imperialism. And the same people who think that we benefited from slavery will also tell us that we don't need reparations. Which is wild because our ancestors basically built this country and the black community itself has had nothing to show for it. We've yet to reap any sort of benefit from slavery. How can you say that we benefited from something when we've yet to experience the fruit of said labor? Also, reparations isn't just a one and done thing. It's not when we just all get cut a check. Reparations looks like releasing all of the black prisoners from prison who were incarcerated due to drug charges. Drug charges that they got because they had to sell the drugs in order to make money to feed both themselves and their families because they could not get jobs and were denied jobs that would pay them enough to do exactly that. And also, it looks like clearing those records as well. Reparations looks like investing within black communities for the sole purpose of lifting up black people and not hiking up the taxes or rent for black tenants. It's about making everything more accessible for black people. It's about giving black people the ability to start their own businesses without having to pay the loan back. It's heavily taxing people like Elon Musk and all of these other rich people that primarily got their earnings off of the backs of black people. Reparations has to be an ongoing thing. And with that, Autobots, transform and roll out.
Why does a person that never was a slave deserve compensation from a person that never owned a slave?
Bank of America and much of the U.S. financial system were built on the profits from slavery, using enslaved people as loan collateral and even owning them when debts weren't paid. These same institutions, which grew into billion-dollar corporations from the slavery of our ancestors, continue to uphold systems of institutional racism that today prevent black people from building generational wealth. The horrors of slavery didn't end with emancipation. They left deep scars that still shape the lives of black people today. This inherited trauma, known as post-traumatic slave syndrome, is rooted in generations of violence, ripped apart families, and stolen identity. It continues to affect mental health, family relationships, and the overall well-being of black people. The U.S. government has paid reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II and even Americans held hostage in Iran. Yet the only people paid for slavery were the slave owners for losing their slaves after the Civil War. The victims of slavery were never paid. Our ancestors were stolen and endured some of the most violent atrocities in human history. So white people in this country could build their largely unearned generational wealth that they still sit on today, while black people have been systemically denied the right to build and pass down the wealth we fought hard to earn for generations. Because every single time we did build, for example, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, the whites burned down the entire town and slaughtered every single black person that they could find. You stole our ancestors. You stole their labor, which made the U.S. an economic superpower. You stole their futures. You dehumanized, brutalized, and traumatized them. Then that generational trauma was passed down to their descendants, who you continue to traumatize and brutalize with your systems of oppression put into place to limit and prevent us from creating generational wealth. And you refuse to dismantle your systems of oppression because that would be admitting that white prosperity was built on black suffering. But you still owe for the centuries of unspeakable atrocities, because reparations are not charity. It's an unpaid debt that you owe.
You want to talk about reparations? We pay reparations.
The United States does not pay reparations. The last time the US government compensated a group for racial injustice was in 1988 towards Japanese Americans. So no, you do not pay reparations. But go on.
What do you mean? You want reparations? Our taxpayer dollars, which are mostly white people paying that.
White people make up roughly 60% of the US population, so it would be genuinely strange if they didn't contribute the most in tax dollars. This isn't a valid argument.
Goes to, what is it? Affordable housing, government programs, EBT, scholarships, DEI, you guys getting jobs.
These are not reparations, they're poverty programs that exist for all Americans, and the data shows that white Americans are the biggest beneficiaries.
Let's take all that, factor in the theft, factor in the crime, factor in the murders, and then we'll talk about reparations on the show.
Talking about theft when arguing against reparations is honestly comical. 250 years of unpaid labor is the theft.
How about that? You probably won't like that, will you? Because you're not going to like the numbers. But we are all, frankly, exhausted.
She's exhausted about this concept of reparations, yet this administration that she proudly supports spends over $1 billion per day on a war in Iran. So it's not about the money, and it never was.
Well, if you've watched to this end, thank you once again, and kindly I will request that you hit the like, subscribe and the share button, as this will go a long way in supporting my channel. Well, the issue about reparation in the United States is something that is quite sensitive and devastating at the same time, as this specific issue has faced multiple legal hurdles that we're getting to see. Even after close to 400 years since slavery was abolished in the United States, the Black American community is still one of the only communities in the United States that have never been compensated for all the inhumane activities that their ancestors and their current descendants are still experiencing in the country. As you all know, as I mentioned before, the United States was one of the countries that was at the front line when it came to voting against the reparations being given to the descendants of slaves, and this is something that is still quite disturbing given the fact that Black Americans are still citizens of the United States, and having a government that is still going against or is still not willing to compensate one of its most discriminated citizens is something that is actually not making any sense at all. And going back to the reparation issue, there is only one state in the United States that has actually implemented the reparation policy in the United States, and that is the state of Illinois. We are getting to see that Black individuals have actually been getting compensated, that is for the reparations, since in the year 2021, and it is believed that over 25,000 United States dollars has been given to families believed to be descendants of these former slaves who had experienced the harsh cruelty of slavery, Jim Crow laws, and systemic economic exclusion. And what actually makes this thing to be interesting is the fact that on June 2026, we're getting to see that the United States government, federal government under the Department of Justice, has actually tabled a motion to do away with the reparation that is back to the Black community, as it is describing this as being a racially discriminatory move that is actually offering out benefits to a specific group of individuals over the others. And according to them, reparation for the Black descendants of slaves should not take place in the United States, as they view it as being another form of discrimination that is actively taking place in the country. And also, you need to understand that since Trump came back into power, there have been always this push to have policies that will actually be discriminatory against the Black American community, with other policies like the day incentives being wiped out in most federal corporate companies. And by doing so, it is said that no corporate company should actually employ anyone strictly based on their skin color, and they should rather employ someone strictly based on their competence. And when you're looking at this metric and type of comparison, it is quite an injustice given the fact that there is actually a very huge wealth gap that is between the Black and the majority white community. And this goes back to the transatlantic slave trade period, where you're getting to see that the Black slaves were never compensated even after slavery was abolished. And again, even after them supposedly getting their freedom, there was also Jim Crow laws and the systemic economic exclusion that specifically targeted the Black American community individuals, ensuring that they never built generational wealth. And so this is actually also coupled by the underfunding of schools in Black neighborhoods. And this eventually makes the Black people to be economically incapacitated and actually forces them to work extra hard to acquire what an average white American actually gets easily. And so, back to the reparations, it is quite disturbing to notice that the United States government is actually not willing to give reparations. And you all understand that reparations have actually been paid to several groups of individuals that were believed to be discriminated or subjugated by a particular race. And a good example is the British government that actually gave reparations to the slave owners. Well, I shouldn't have used this example, as you're getting to see that for them, this is still another insult to the descendants of the former slaves, as the same British government went ahead to compensate the former slave or owners for losing their labor, leaving out the individuals who actually experienced the torture and the inhumane cruelty of slavery. And so that is an example that I actually shouldn't have brought up. Thinking about it, other than the Hebrews who are compensated by the German government, that is for the cruelties that they endured during their dark period in Europe, there is technically no history of any blacks getting compensated specifically for the cruelty of the transatlantic slave trade period. And so the US is also well known for not paying reparations, and for the Black American community, they are not actually giving up on this fight to get reparations, as we're getting to see that as time goes, the legal battle between the Black American community and the United States government, federal government, I mean, is actually growing. And with the UN backed move, you're getting to see that in the near future, there is actually to be positive gaining from all these efforts. As personally, I believe that Black Americans do deserve these reparations. For these individuals, technically built the United States economy to what it is today. And having this in mind, the United States government has always tried to find ways in which it will justify their actions and not actually give reparations to these individuals. And you're getting to see that some people are actually giving reason as to why the government should not pay reparation to the Black American community. Reasons like it is not everyone that owned slaves during the transatlantic slave era period or during the slavery period in the United States. And so it will be wrong for the majority of the white American population to actually pay reparations to the Black community, as most of these individuals or their ancestors were never involved in this slavery process. Well, you can see how weak this argument is. And this is actually acting as a bigger motivating factor for Black Americans to push for reparation, as you're getting to see that one of the major motivating factors is it is the economic incapacitation that the Black American community experience. And this can actually be viewed by the extreme wealth gap between the average Black American family and the average white American family. And so, in order for this gap to be closed, or in order for this gap to be brought to a point of equity, Black Americans simply need these reparations from the United States government. Well, this again gets to mark the end of this episode. Thank you once again for watching to this end, and kindly don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the share button, and see you in the next episode.